Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Mr. Harris, Mr. Osborne, Mr. Nemes, thank you for not blocking me on Facebook.
I haven't blocked you yet.
Yeah, I've not found Mr. Fleming yet, but best district in the state from this morning for education. More or less a lifelong Oldham County resident. There were a couple of years I escaped to Louisville, but I moved back here for my children and education. We've all agreed, and all of you all have touched on it multiple times, our main issue is funding. We need more money in the state. And some of you probably know where I'm going because we've talked about it before. I challenge each and every one of you in November when you had your last town hall. I've asked you, at least Mr. Harris and Mr. Osborne directly, what ideas do you have to generate new revenue for the state, to generate funds? I've not seen any legislation written to generate new funds. You guys both agreed, and I think Mr. Nemes agreed too, that gambling is an idea. You guys would welcome casinos in your area. I've not seen legislation to introduce that. Also, there's Senate Bill 80 from Mr. Dan Syme to legalize cannabis. I know it's a difficult topic. My daughter goes to school here. In fact, her teacher's sitting right next to me. I get that there's a stereotype and stigma with that. I do. But Senate Bill 80 needs serious consideration. I've not heard any other better ideas from you guys. Senate Bill 80 to legalize cannabis, to throw out some numbers quickly so I don't dominate everyone's time. Colorado, for example, $250 million from tax revenue alone. That's taxes they didn't have the year before and before they legalized it. It's new taxes. You're not raising taxes on anyone. $2.4 billion total economic impact from new growth, new industries, new jobs, and then the taxes, of course, from that. In Kentucky, we're well known for cannabis anyway. We're not getting any funds from it. I submit to you the $250 million in tax revenue alone, based on Colorado. I think we can beat that, though. It is a lot better of an idea than raising 6% tax on veterinary services, on personal grooming services, landscaping. I noticed with the vets, we didn't include thoroughbreds. We didn't want to upset the horse racing industry. It's only on small animals, dogs, cats, rabbits, whatever else you may have. So help me understand and help these people understand why you won't support Senate Bill 80, what your hang-ups are about it, and I ask you to use facts and reason, and not regurgitate the same lies and mistruths that our governor has stated before. There's absolutely zero deaths from it ever recorded. Alcohol, that causes a number of issues. I don't think we need to get into that. But help me and these good folks understand why you won't support Senate Bill 80 in lieu of whatever other ideas you guys may have for increasing revenue.
When I saw you walk in, I knew that question was coming. House Bill, I had it up. House Bill 229 has been filed by Jerry Miller I'm going to make sure it's 229. 229 has been filed by Jerry Miller. I'm a co-sponsor, Ken's a co-sponsor, and it would bring casinos to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I know that's something that expanded gaming is something that Speaker Osborne supported in the past. I assume still supports that. So that is an option that we're for. But for whatever reason, there's not the votes for that in the House or the Senate in either party. And so that's where we are. So I'm for expanded gaming, not just casinos, also fantasy sports and all these other things that we ought to be doing, I believe. As I always say, we already have casino gaming. We just send our money to Indianapolis because it's right over the river. And that's the Kentucky way, I guess, mighty foolish. So I support casino gaming. I also support medicinal marijuana. I'm sorry, Larry, I don't support Senate Bill 80. I do not support recreational marijuana. I do support medical marijuana. I think our people support it. Our people do not want recreational at this point. And so that's where I am. I came to that late, in all honesty. When I ran for office, I did not support medical marijuana. I'd never done marijuana. If somebody did it around me, I disassociated myself from them. That's just not something I did. After I was elected, I sat down with a bunch of people who said, I don't care what the doctors are telling you, and the doctors were telling me Kentucky Medical Association is not for it. But a lot of people were saying, I don't care what the doctors are saying, let me tell you what it means to me. Let me tell you what it means to my kid. And then, I was meeting with them out of respect, but not really an open mind or open heart, but just out of respect. And then when I listened to them, I was thinking, man, there may be something to this. So I started talking to more doctors. I started reading studies, started talking to more constituents. And so now I'm a full supporter of medical marijuana. I'll be sponsoring a bill that I'll file this interim with Representative St. Ange and Representative John Sims from Fleming County to try to get it over the hump next time. I think we will. I hope we will in the House. But anyway, so what are we for? To support, I'm for expanding gaming in a lot of different ways, not just casinos, and I'm for medicinal marijuana as well. I won't say more than that because I know Ken is aching to answer this question. It's one of his favorite things. So I'm not going to steal any of his thunder. So it better be good.
Yeah, thanks. To be point blank, as I mentioned, I work in the mental health field, and you can slice or dice it as much as one wants, but I have seen a lot of devastation occur when it comes to opiates, and we can sit here and debate it all day, but based on my experience, what I've seen, marijuana is a gateway to that. I know that. I know you'll shake your head, but I've seen it, and I've got documentation in our clinic of that's what it is. And that's my data. So you might have other different data, and that's fine. And we can debate it all day. But I will not support marijuana, legalizing that. When it comes to medical marijuana, I'm on the fence about that, to be honest with you. I've got to have more information in order to make that decision. If I'm leaning one way, more no. But I need to look at that more before we actually come to fruition and making a vote. And I know Jason has done a lot of information, has a lot of information, and I'm going to tap him to help me out, educate me on that particular aspect.
I'll get you.
I'm sure you will. When it comes to gaming, as mentioned, I do support that. I think it's important to help that. It's a constitutional change, and it's going to take a while for us to get there, but I do support that. We talked about additional revenue and so forth. That is a tough nut to crack. We have about $11 billion in tax expenditures that we've gone through. We look at, let me tell you something that's very complex. It's a domino effect. It takes, there's a lot of issues that come in those tax expenditures and credits and so forth. And you have to go through a very methodical, thoughtful process on the ramifications of what those things offer and what they do. I know the Speaker and the President will be setting up a task force in terms of looking at that whole environment of tax expenditures and to go through that. Talking about what's the dollar value, and in addition to that, where's the return on that? The return goes back to what I said a few minutes ago: education and economic development. It's got those tax expenditures and credits need to funnel into those two pillars. So I know the Speaker and the President will be setting that task force up hopefully very soon. Not to put you on the spot, Speaker, but hopefully very soon to go through a very methodical, systematic approach to address that, to find those additional revenues. If you find this like 1%, that's $1.1 billion that we can find. And you can do the math and play the math all you want. When it comes to other expenses in terms of sales and so forth, no matter what the General Assembly comes up with, no matter what we do, there's going to be people that are going to be upset and mad because it's going to be affecting them. We get it, we understand. But we're in a dire situation. We need to find some additional money in order to meet our obligations, to fund the pensions, as we have committed to doing that, as well as fund other services within this government. And it's not going to be an easy process. What has been put forth is a first step of what we're doing. Personally, I'd love to see income tax down to 3%, eventually go down to 0%. And I'd love to see sales tax at 4%, but we're on the base. That will put money in people's pocket. That will shift to give money in your pocket to decide where you want to send it. I mean, what do you want to buy, and where and when you want to buy it. I don't really give y'all control what y'all want to do with the money, instead of the government do what they want with the money. That's part I think we need to look at in terms of tax reform. What we did basically is a first step. Once again, there was an effort to try to address all segments of the society in the Commonwealth. It's not perfect. We know it's not perfect. And we still got a long way to go in getting there. But we are trying to make an effort. We are trying to find some funds in order to meet our obligations. It's not going to be easy. It may not be a whole lot of fun, but it's something that we were elected to do, to make those hard decisions so we can go forward and put Kentucky first. Through tax reform, we become more competitive. That's the bottom line. We've got to be more competitive so we can bring more money in, to look at possibly increasing teacher salary, to look at even the forensic lab folks that have got low pay scale. They have 2 or 3 degrees like many of y'all have. They get lower pay than you all. From what I can tell based on my research. Those are some of the things we need to accomplish. It's not going to be easy task. We ask for your patience, but more importantly, we want your input and your thoughts.
To be perfectly honest, Larry, as you and I discussed, there's simply not support in the body for legalization of marijuana. It is the nature of Kentucky. In many instances, we still have 30% of our territory that is dry. And the interesting thing about the evolution of the dry territory, though, is that in the last 12 years, since we passed the moist liquor licenses, which allowed restaurants in dry territories to serve alcohol by the drink at restaurants, is we've seen that amount of dry territory shrink by about almost half. And the reason for that is that, to your point, people have realized that all the horrible stereotypes that people had in mind of drunken brawls in bar rooms and people getting thrown through plate glass windows and prostitution through the roof and all those things that they had heard were going to happen. But if they legalized alcohol in their communities, those things didn't happen, and so therefore there was a receptiveness, just like there was here in Oldham County. I can remember back in I believe it was the 90s when we had our first wet dry vote that I can remember, and it lost in a landslide. It wasn't even close. And then you fast forward 16 years and it passes overwhelmingly. So attitudes do change, but I think that you have to start dispelling myths and dispelling sound bites that you referenced through a process. And as far as medical marijuana, the reason I support medical marijuana, I don't really know if it has great medicinal qualities or not. But I can tell you the one thing that we don't need to do is we don't need to be making criminals out of people trying to help themselves. We have obviously no moral objection to prescribing opiates and narcotics out the wazoo. So certainly we can't stand on moral high ground and say that no, we're not going to prescribe certain things or allow the use of what we claim as illicit drugs, when we know that the vast majority of the illicit drug market right now is prescription drugs. So I think that clearly we've got to stop criminalizing those people, and I think that we will get there. I think to Jason's point, we got close this year, and I think that with a few thoughtful revisions that he's working on with his bill, I think that we will get there. And I think that the support has grown immensely in the legislature and throughout the state just in the last couple of years that I have seen. As far as casinos go, I've sponsored every form of casino legislation known to man. We do not, it's a myth that we need a constitutional amendment. There is no constitutional prohibition against gambling in this state. There was a constitutional amendment or prohibition against state-run lotteries. And that's why we had to pass a constitutional amendment for the lottery bill. There is absolutely no constitutional prohibition against gambling. Otherwise, we wouldn't have horse racing, because horse racing is gambling. The reason that is of significance is it only takes a simple majority to pass a statutory law, which we actually passed out of the House in 2008, I believe it was. It was the only time we ever got a chance to vote on it. It was the only time we ever had the votes to pass it. But it requires a significantly higher barrier. It requires 60 votes to put a constitutional amendment out there. To follow up on Ken's point, we are going to be appointing a task force working group on tax exemptions. This week, Robert Stivers and I met with about that a little earlier today to figure out exactly how large we're going to make that working group. The problem with tax exemptions, or tax expenditures, is everybody talks about the fact that we exempt more revenue than we actually bring in this state. But understanding that each one of those tax expenditures is in and of itself a special interest group, like people that eat food. That everybody always thinks of the special interests that control these tax expenditures, like people that take prescription medication. Those are the two largest tax expenditures that we have in this state. And so when you start taking those things onto a more personal level, you realize that it's not $13 billion in corporate giveaways that we're talking about here. And that brings us to the final point that you made about veterinary services and exempting large animals. And it was not a conscious decision to exempt large animals. It was as much as it was that the next largest tax expenditure is agricultural exemptions, farm exemptions that we give to our farmers that are so vital to our economy here in the state. Are those things that should be looked at? Absolutely. We should be looking at each one of those things and evaluating them on their own merit. And I believe that we will here in a very quick process. Ken actually had a really good idea that we just never could get fully baked this year, which was to actually sunset all the tax expenditures over the next 2 years. We just draw a line in the sand and say, in 2 years, all these tax expenditures go away, and you got to come to us and convince us that they need to go back in there. It was actually, I think it has real possibilities, and I think that we may very well get to something that looks a lot like that.
It's going to be a great idea. I'd like to see everybody come. You think we're busy now in Frankfurt? You just wait till everybody comes and justifies that. A couple of things on this. I think the best way to build your revenue is build it on production. The fact that because of the change that we made in legislation, and we have $9 billion worth of announced commitment to come to Kentucky, where the previous high was $5 billion in a year. I think that will lead us in the right direction. It's going to take time to do that. On the gambling issue, remember, this is the pockets that support gambling are in the Louisville, Lexington, Northern Kentucky area, maybe a little bit in Bowling Green. But this is a statewide issue, and there's never been the support to do gambling because you got the rural, the urban, and everything else. And the only thing that I think that vote was to allow slots at the racetracks, and that was very limited. As far as the marijuana issue is, one thing I'd like to see us do at the federal level is to take marijuana off the schedule as a controlled substance, because we have no idea what beneficial results can come from learning what the marijuana plant can do. Look at the tobacco plant. The tobacco plant was the bed for creating the drug that eradicated Ebola in Africa. Who knows what could be out there with the marijuana plant being taken off that schedule so it can research, good research can do. On the, Larry, you and I will never agree on recreational use, but on the issue of medicinal use, I think as long as the protocols are very strict and they're led by the medical facility, the medical community, taking advantage of what has happened in other states like Israel and some of the European states, we can do safe, effective medical marijuana. But it's a two-pronged thing. Get the feds to take it off and that. And then the other thing is, I guess my main opposition to the recreational uses. You bring up some good points, but we don't know what it does to the mind of a developing person, because we know the brain develops up to age 25, and we just don't know what marijuana does to that development and all that. So we'll disagree on that one issue, but that's where I think we stand on the other. So thank you so much.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Benjamin Geese, and I teach United States history